place is surrounded by military. At any given moment, there's 100,000 active duty military in Colorado Springs. We had very little contact, if any, with the United States Air Force, once in a while, but very seldom. Our contact was U.S. Army. The Army, it's a question of numbers. I mean, they're the largest group. There's 30,000 troops at Fort Carson and 15,000 civilians, so it's a little city of its own. And it's a federal reservation, so the FBI has jurisdiction there. But these are crimes committed off post in the city, and they're active duty Army. There was so much of that that I was a member of the Officers Club at Fort Carson. Even though I wasn't in the Army, but everybody knew me. Hey, it's Kenda. Because I saw those guys all the time. I was personally acquainted with every commanding general at Fort Carson. I changed the general every 2 years. I knew them all because I always had contact with somebody in the Army. So the Army personnel, they recruit you for the infantry. It's take a rifle and walk that way. You know, and that's your bullet stopper for the U.S. government, ultimately what you are. So there are times, and there have been times, when they take Class 4 recruits. A Class 4 recruit is a guy with a criminal record. But in the United States Army, they teach them squad tactics. That seemed like a regular idea to me, but that's what they used to do. So I did have a lot of contact with Army personnel, and I put a lot of them in jail. Now, we had a deal worked out with them, which is it's unique to Colorado Springs. The Judge Advocate General at Fort Carson and the District Attorney of the 4th Judicial District in Colorado Springs had a mutual agreement that if an active duty military member committed a crime in the civilian world off the post, they could prosecute him in civilian court, or we could take him to the court-martial through the Judge Advocate General. I had an episode about a colonel who was a dentist who tried to kill his old lady, right, by injecting her IV line with bug juice. It would have worked, but anyway, she survived because it never got to her. And they wanted to court-martial him because he was an embarrassment to the officer corps of the United States Army. He was a bird colonel. And they had to bring in generals from all over the world to sit in his court. And they couldn't wait to convict him. I think the jury was out for 5 minutes. All the generals string him up in Leavenworth, which is what they did. So yeah, you had a lot of contact with your Army.
Okay, so starboard side put Andrew to work, but in the meantime, this lady has a question over here on port side.
Hi, Joe. Carolyn from Valencia, Los Angeles.
Okay.
How many unsolved cases have you had in your career, and are they still unsolved?
There were 31 out of 387. I made arrests in 356 of them. My clearance rate was 92%. The national average is 55%, so a little better than that. Or I'm a dumb guy who doesn't know who killed 8% of the people. It all depends on how you look at it. But of those 31 cases, I knew who killed 17 of them, and I couldn't prove it. And 14 of them, I didn't have a clue. Of the 17, we have since cleared 2 of those through DNA testing. So I'm down to 29. And they were, the 2 people we did arrest were ones I believe were responsible at the time. But you can come and go from a place and not leave evidence of your passing. You can do that. It's just luck. It's not genius, but it happens. Despite how hard you work, you don't get them all. But I got a bunch of them. Over here now, yes?
I'm Donna Riley from Park City, Utah. My question is...
Nice place, Park City.
So, what is your methodology for choosing what crimes you're going to put on an episode?
Okay, that's a fair question. Yeah.
Are there some crimes that are too egregious or character that you can massage into an episode?
Sure.
Somebody else?
I'll answer both. Okay. First question was, how do you choose? Well, Colorado has an Open Records Act, which means that you, as a citizen, could walk into the Colorado Springs Police Department or any police department in Colorado and say, you know, my neighbor was murdered 10 years ago. I was always curious about that, and the case has been adjudicated and the appeals are exhausted, so now it's a public record. Can I have that report? Sure. Was there a fee? Yep, $1 a page. How many pages are there? 3,000. Never mind, I'm not that interested in my neighbor. He's dead anyway, you know. So people would walk out, but if you're a television network, you buy them 60 at a time. So I provided them with a list of all the murders I handled over a period of my career, and they buy 60 at a whack, and then they read them all and decide which ones they like better than others, and then they call me, I contact the families. I don't have to contact the families, but I do. And it's nice to know that every time I've done contact with a family, would you mind if we presented your daughter's case, your son's case, your wife's case? The answer is always the same. Please do. I don't want my loved one to be forgotten. And so we do. In the second part of the question, are there crimes that are so egregious or so awful you won't put them on television? Absolutely. I will not do cases involving children or infants. I had a number of those. Violent deaths involving little kids. No. There are other cases, excuse me, other cases involving particularly evil people who wind up getting killed, who our concern in court was maybe the jury's going to dig him up so they can kill him again. You know, I mean, you think the jury's going to give the guy the silver star for eliminating this guy, you know? So those we don't do either. There are not many of those, but there are some that are just like, oh my God, no wonder you get killed. You know, it's because of the behavior of the victim. So you avoid those because it's too complicated. You can't buy a lipstick too big enough to cover up some of those people. You can't.
Okay, over here on port side.
Andrew Smith from Sacramento, California. I'm curious as to how you got selected for this honor program. How did they find you?
It's my wife's fault. It is. If she was in here, she's not in here at the moment, but it is her fault. Quickest answer possible is this. Diane Sawyer had a program in the late 90s called Turning Point, where they were trying to get into the 60 Minutes crowd, primetime TV, 2 or 3 stories. It was on Wednesday nights. I had a murder case that drew national attention, and I look up in my office, we're busy, I'm really busy, I'm always really busy. And Diane Sawyer's at my door with her hands in her hips, and a film crew behind her. And she announces, I'm Diane Sawyer. I said, I knew that, what do you want? I don't like the press, any level of press. You know, they're nothing more than voyeurs in my view. But anyway, she said, well, I have to talk to you about this case. I said, well, I have 2 hours I can give you right here, right now. We'll talk about this case. Well, I can't possibly do it in 2 hours. I said, well, that's a shame, because I already down to an hour and 59 minutes. So she did, and I wanted to try my case on national television, so I spoke generically about murder. No dates, no times, no names, violence in society, why people kill people. For 30 minutes. They put all 30 minutes on national television, they loved it. My mother-in-law called me from Pittsburgh. She says, I saw you with Diane. Sorry, I know, Mom, I was there. It was her. I didn't care about it. I was busy. Time goes by. That show dies. The natural death. You know, they took it off the air. They sold that interview to A&E, to the History Channel, because it was perfect. It was generic. No dates, no times, you know. Plug in 30 minutes of free tape on murder. And they did it all the time. A producer from Discovery sees it, writes me a letter. I'm retired. And I'm reading the letter, I put it down. My wife, Kathy, said, what's that? It's a letter from some guy who says he's going to put me on television like that's going to happen. She said, you should call him. I'm not calling him. No, you should call him. I'm not going to call him. I don't like TV. You know, so this goes on for 3 days. She wears me out. It's like, pow, you going to call him today? Well, that was a good one. You've been working out? I mean, you know. All right, I'll call him. I'll call him. Season 8 premiered August 29th. So it's her fault, and she was right.
Another question here on the port side.
Jerry from California.
Okay.
What is the percentage you think that you and your detectives, through your investigation, had the defendant actually confess to the crime?
You don't get confessions in every case. I mean, I would get, if I had to guess, I'd say it's less than half. I'd say less than half, probably well less than half. Some people will lie to the end. Show them a movie of them doing it. That's not me. Really, you know. So it just depends on the personality and how you approach them and what kind of case it is. It's very easy in a parental homicide to get a confession, because a parental homicide, there's no intent. You don't intend to kill this kid. It's an attempt at discipline that goes awry. You choke too much, you punch too hard, the kid's dead. That person wants forgiveness even from you, even from the police, somebody. I didn't mean this, right? So after I would establish rapport with that sort of person, a parental killer, I'd get behind and put my hands on their shoulders and I'd whisper in their ear. And I'd say, I know you didn't mean it, did you? No, I didn't mean it. And it's true, they didn't mean it. But you get confessions less than half of the time. You can play a lot of games with people and cause a person to confess. And sometimes it's successful, most of the time it isn't. Because ultimately, they are driven by one thing, and that's fear of reprisal. What are you going to do to me? I'm not telling you what I did, because then you might do something really awful. You might kill me. You might give me a death sentence. You know? So it's very rare to get to say you have more than half a confession. I don't think so. You know, it's going to be less than half, and I probably well less than half. Unless it's a criminal murder, then the rate's pretty good. But that's because it's a unique kind of crime. And we didn't have that many of those. I had them, but I didn't have that many. So that's your answer, you know, less than half.
Over here, please.
Hi, I'm Renee from Montville, Utah. And I have a simple question. In one of your recent episodes, you said for fun you like to draw.
Oh yeah, I
And
do.
when you leave, you throw it away. Why do you throw it away?
Because it's not, I'm not able to finish it, and I have to finish it. I don't know. I just like, no, I'll start again. I haven't done it for a while because I'm like a busy guy at the moment. Good thing I'm retired and I don't have time to work, you know. But the drawing thing, I've always enjoyed it. Kathy has preserved a lot of them. They hang in our house and so on. Some are pretty good, some are pretty bad, but you know, it's whatever. My wife is a painter, and she's a photographer, and she's a quilt maker, and she has an idea a second for a new hobby. But she's very talented. She's sold her paintings, so she's legally a professional artist. She has sold her photography, so she is legally a professional photographer. And she has sold her quilts, so she's pretty talented. As for me, I just do the drawing. And I talk in front of a camera. That's what I do. You know. But hey, whatever. Who's next?
So I don't know how many stories, oh, sorry, I'm Courtney from Colorado, and I don't know how many stories you still follow from Colorado, but we recently had a homicide up in Firestone with the Watts family, where the husband sadly
Killed a woman and 2 kids?
Yes. I'm just curious how you would have approached a case like that if you would have.
That was beyond simple. I mean, when I watched that on the news, I was sitting in Virginia, 2,000 miles away from Firestone, Colorado, and they've got the husband on the TV screen telling him how his family's missing with his arms folded, dancing on one foot to the other. And I looked at the guy and said, he killed him. She said, why? I said, look at his body language. He killed him. They arrested him the next day. I mean, that was like a slam dunk. In the murder business, you call it a grounder. Because the guy hits the ground ball to the shortstop, you throw him out at first. Nope. You know, it's a grounder. It's just real simple. And that was very simple. And what's not simple about this, he strangled those kids. You know how long it takes to strangle somebody? 2 minutes. You know why? Strongest muscles in your body are in your neck. Human head weighs 10 pounds. It's very, very difficult to manually strangle somebody. I don't know how you can do that to a little kid or whatever. Humans are capable of doing that. So.
Hi, I'm Cheryl from Pittsburgh. I really hate to put you on the spot. I reread your book.
Yes.
Like last night, I was brushing up on it.
Oh.
I know. I wanted to touch base on your retirement. You make reference in your book that something happened that
That was actually
You
several
would be
things.
the hunted?
No, it was actually several things that did. It was more this combination of things, but it's difficult to explain in a book. But ultimately, the explanation is this. I had reached my emotional limit, and I knew it. I couldn't tell another mother who wasn't coming home anymore. I just couldn't do it. Kathy was furious with me because I refused to be a desk pilot. I went out and kicked doors and pulled guns on people. I didn't have to, but that's what I signed up for. And I felt that I was going to be as violent as the people I was pursuing and wind up in jail for it. And I didn't want to do that. So that's what I meant about the hunted. I would turn into them. I was going to kill the guy that I had in my interrogation room. I was going to kill him. And they said, okay, I'm done. 74-year-old man, 5-year-old boy, his grandson, he sexually assaulted the kid. Why'd you touch that kid? And he said he came on to me. That's the last thing I remember. And my guy said, Lieutenant, and I'm strangling this guy, and he's turning blue. And I said, get him away from me. Call him medical and get him away from me. And I went to my office and I typed a 2-line memorandum. As of September 1, 1996, I'm retired. That was a Friday and I wasn't there on Monday. It took me 2 years to lose the venom, but I finally did. And I was sitting at my kitchen table and my wife said, hi. You haven't been paying attention. I'm just sitting here for 2 hours. She said, well, I know, but you're the guy I married again. Well, that was very nice. Thank you. I wasn't a policeman like that. Can I answer your question? All right. Yes.
I'm Leah from Chicago, and my question is, what was the most interesting investigation that you, or crime, I guess, that you ever investigated?
Every single one of them. There they are. They're always, I had a sign made by a guy who makes signs. There's always a guy that burns your address into wood or whatever. And there was a guy in Colorado that really made some nifty ones. He was really good at it. So I said, I need you to make me a sign for my office. Sure. So he makes this sign. And it hung there for 20 years. When I retired, I gave it to my guy that took over. And I said, you'll understand what that means in 60 days. And the sign said, mysteries make my head hurt. He related it only took him 30 days to figure out. But every single case is unique. It involves unique people, it involves unique everything. And to me, it was always the ultimate puzzle. Here we're faced with a crossword puzzle or a physical puzzle, and we don't have all the pieces. We got to make this into a photograph of somebody, and we don't have any parts. So it was fascinating me. It just fascinated me. It used to drive my guys crazy because we do this in the show where Carl Marino kind of visualizes what he thinks might have happened in a crime scene. I used to do that, except the difference was I talked to myself out loud, and everybody say, "Oh God, here he goes again." Yeah, everybody walk out of the crime scene. They just walk out. He's nuts, And I'd look at something that the perpetrator did. Why'd you do that? Why did you do that? I'd talk to the victim. Who did this to you? And so and people would go, he's that's it, man. I'm not staying in here. And they just leave. But it helped me to visualize what happened. And so we expressed that in the show with that particular technique with Marina. But that is true. That's what every one of them was. Some more so than others. Some were startling. Sometimes you have to understand that people can do anything. They can do anything. I used to tell my young detectives that. I'd say, remember, humans are capable of anything. Don't ever think somebody wouldn't do that because somebody will. And when I ended that morning meeting every day, because I had women as well as men, I said, okay, boys and girls, hit the street. Be careful. The humans are out. Every day.
Way to your left here.
Dee from San Diego, and
because it happened in Colorado Springs, I was wondering if you had any involvement in the John Benet Ramsey case?
It did not happen in Colorado Springs, it happened in Boulder, Colorado,
Oh.
which is 200, well, not 200, 120 miles north of another jurisdiction. I'll tell you something real quick about the Ramsey case. It's unprosecutable. It will never, ever go to court. It cannot. Fatal investigative errors were made by the Boulder PD in the first day of that investigation that results in no evidence being admissible in the courtroom, including the victim's body. What murder? The body's inadmissible. They did not have a crime scene warrant. So it cannot be done, irrespective of the press. Oh, that came down everything, John Benet Ramsey. Okay, all right. You know. And the reason they do that is that Ramsey family put the fun back in dysfunctional. Okay? You don't dress up a 5-year-old girl like a whore and have her dance around the stage to relive her mother's life. You teach a 5-year-old kid how to ride a bike, not them. Okay? So the sick part of that, the sad part of that. In 1993, 3 years before Ramsey was murdered in December of 1996, we had a meeting in Vail, Colorado. The Denver PD and myself, we paid for the meeting because we knew everybody'd show up because Vail is really nice. So it's in the summertime. Free beer, you know. And we invited the 67 counties in the state of Colorado to come to the meeting. Every law enforcement agency, no matter how small, no matter how big, sheriff's departments, municipal, state, everybody show up. What do you want? Well, see this map? There's a map of the state of Colorado up in the wall. Drew a red line through the center of it. There are people in this room who've never investigated a homicide, ever, or haven't done so for 30 years. You don't know what to do when one happens, particularly if it's ugly. So you live north of that line, you call the Denver PD. You live south of that line, you call me. And we show up, we investigate your case, we lie to the press and say we work for you. We tie your case up with a yellow ribbon, you hold the press conference and we disappear. Standing ovation. Standing ovation. Oh man, what a great idea that is. Oh, we love you, we love you. But the problem is, egos get in the way. When the event occurs, some young copper says, you know, we ought to call those guys. We don't need those guys. Oh, yes you do, because you're an idiot. You need those guys, okay? So I was retired for 91 days when that crime happened. The chief of the Boulder PD calls me and he says, I want to make you my deputy chief of investigations. I said, I'm sure you do. You want me to take over the Ramsey case? Well, yes, you know. I had a little bit of a reputation in the state. So that's why he called me. And he knew I was retired, so you know, he's going to pay me $100 grand a year to go do this. I said, I have one question for you, Chief, just one. What's that? I said, well, are the press accounts of what you've done so far reasonably accurate? Oh, no, they're accurate. I said, okay, good. They're going to fire you within a year. The next time there's an election, you're going to need a new district attorney. And he hung up on me. 8 months later, they fired him. The next election, they fired the district attorney. They drove that case under a bus. And that kid's in a grave, and nobody's going to pay for it, irrespective of how many specials we have on TV and how many experts offer their opinions. I used to say this to my own detectives, I'll say it to you. Don't tell me what you think. Don't tell me what you believe. Don't tell me what your gut tells you. Tell me what you can prove. If you can't prove it, don't waste my time telling me your opinion. Because they're useless, okay? In that particular case, that kid is never going to get her day in court. Okay. Next question. Yes, sir.
My name is Jim from Columbia, South Carolina.
All right.
And formerly of Denver.
Got out of snow, huh? That's what I did.
I was wondering, in any of your cases where the Burke was convicted, were they ever given a death sentence? And
Yes.
have you ever attended any of the executions?
Yes, on the death sentence, I put 5 people on death row in Colorado, and the Supreme Court of the state of Colorado, the most liberal in the country, commuted all 5 to life. So I've never attended an execution. Not that I wouldn't, you know. I worked a case once for 3 years involving a guy named Stanley, no middle name, Brown. Stanley was a little puke, little bitty guy, but you put a gun in his hand, he was Godzilla, okay? He had a 6-man stick-up crew up and down the Front Range. He murdered 5 people over a period of about a year. And before I identified him, the case took me 3 years to turn him. He robbed a bank in Denver and got caught. They put him in Leavenworth for 99 years. We tried him in absentia and got him a death sentence. But the feds have a policy. They won't release a prisoner to a death penalty state until he's done his federal time. They want their pound of flesh before you can kill him. So I went back to Leavenworth to serve him with a death warrant, okay? Because I couldn't wait, you know, it's come back to Leavenworth. The federal penitentiary in Leavenworth looks like a bank. I mean, it's got a marble front, United States Penitentiary, Leavenworth, Kansas, beautiful thing, you know. Been there since 1852, this prison. So anyway, it's immaculate. We go inside. We find this little goof. He's sitting in this interrogation room. And I said, Stanley, I have a death warrant for you. And he just looked, he stared at me. I said, you know, and Stanley, at the moment, this may change, Stanley, because this was in the 80s. We execute by means of poisonous gas. You're taking a gas chamber and we cook you, you know? And I said, now Stanley, when the record for holding your breath in a Colorado State gas chamber is 1 minute and 52 seconds. When it comes your turn, Stanley, I expect you to do me proud. He just sits there, right? And he's so mad he's shaking. And I said, why don't you hit me, Stanley, and we'll see what happens. But he didn't do it, did he? Look, he'll die in Leavenworth. They'll never kill him. Stanley was a piece of work, you know. And, so yeah, no, I've never witnessed it, but not that I would.
Over here on the fourth side.
I am Carla from Lynchburg, Virginia.
Hi.
Hello. And just wondering, how often or did you rely on criminal profilers, or did you utilize them in some of your cases?
We did all the time. The FBI unit, the behavioral science unit of the FBI, Quantico, Virginia. The nice thing about the feds is they have lots of money. They have their own Air Force. So you want a behavioral science unit, they get in their own jet and they show up. So it's very nice. We worked well with the FBI. You hear a lot of patter about FBI versus local law enforcement. It's a friendly rivalry. It's like the Army, Navy, and Air Force. You know, nobody likes each other, but they actually do. But they tease each other back and forth. Those guys are very sharp. The difficulty with behavioral science is this. If you have a statistical and diagnostic manual of personality disorders, and I own one, I want this thing, you know, the human personality disorder. If somebody is textbook crazy, they match all the elements of that particular event. They're predictable in their behavior, they're predictable in where they live, what kind of car they drive, everything about their life. But if they're a mix, then you got to throw it out the window, because he's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Well, then it's very difficult to predict. And a behavioral science unit would be the first people to tell you that. But he has to be kind of a classic before we can be useful to you. And there were those that were, and they were very useful. Behavioral science does work as long as the perpetrator is a textbook case of insanity. If he's a mixture of 2 or 3 things, then it's a little more vague. It can still be useful, but it's not as useful as if he's really specifically this way. Did that answer your question? Okay. What else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Joy from San Jose, California. I'm just curious if you're involved with the selection of the actors that do the reenactments.
No, it's kind of a funny story about that. I'll tell you how they found the actors. My wife and I go to MGM in California, and we're rookies at this. We have no idea what they're doing. You know, the director says to Kathy, "Can you provide a picture of him when he was 43 years old?" Sure. You know, so she gives him a picture. The Screen Actors Guild has a book, like an MLS book. Instead of houses, it has actors in it, men and women, front, side view, phone number, so on and so forth. The director had a picture of me, and he's paging through the book. He's looking at the book, looking at the picture, looking at the book, and he lands a finger on Carl Marino, says, "Call him." see if he's available. And they called him, and Carl's been me for 8 years. Now, the funny part of it is my wife and my daughter think he looks like me. My son and I think he doesn't. So we're split down the middle. But anyway, that's how they do it. They pick them out of a book, and I have nothing to do with it. And they did it in advance. And the other actors as well. Who else?
Hello,
Oh, okay.
I'm Mary Jean Manetsky from St. Louis. Hello.
Hi.
And you have a great sense of humor. And
Thank
I was
you.
wondering what kind of practical jokes you played on other police officers.
Cops are deadly when it comes to, if you have a weakness, they're going to pursue it to the end. They're going to make you crazy, all right? And there are a lot of them I can't even talk about, but I had a partner in homicide who was Puerto Rican from New York City, Luis Velez, and Luis made the terrible mistake